For today's video log, I read the article by Lawrence Sipe, Talking Back and Taking Over Young Children's Expressive Engagement During Storybook Read-Alouds. This article was challenging educators to look at children's outbursts during storytime read-alouds in a different view. That's kind of what I was getting from it. Sometimes we have kids who will make comments during the middle of a read-aloud, or they will have an action that they reenact during our story time, and we look at them as disturbances, but something that this article encourages us to view them as our expressive moments, and these are ways that students are becoming actively engaged in this story time. And a quote that I pulled out that kind of supports that was, "Children who make such responses, like those outbursts of talking or actions, seem to view stories as invitations to participate or perform." And something that I specifically pulled out from this was the 5 types of expressive engagement. So the first one is dramatizing, recreating what's in the book. For example, if we're reading a book on how to do patty cake, the kids are going to sit there and do patty cake as you're reading that. Second is talking back. Children respond aloud to what they're thinking. So for example, this one came out of the article, is if they're reading Red Riding Hood, Little Red Riding Hood, and it's one of the scenes where the wolf is behind Little Red Riding Hood, and one of the kids in the classroom shout out, "Watch out, Little Red Riding Hood." They're kind of just expressing what they're thinking in their mind as they're hearing the story go on in anticipation. 3 is critiquing and controlling, such as I would or wouldn't conversations. So for example, in Little Red Riding Hood, when he asks the little girl, "What do you have in your basket? You got some bread?" Instead of the kid keeping that thought to themselves, they'd be like, "Oh, I wouldn't tell the wolf that I have bread. I would lie and say no." And they say that out loud as they're thinking it, instead of keeping it to themselves. 4th is inserting. So for example, Little Red Riding Hood, the kids notice, doesn't have a tooth. She has a missing tooth. And so some kids might think, oh, maybe she's around our age. She has a missing tooth because she's losing them. She'll get a new one soon. But maybe little Johnny over here is thinking, maybe someone punched her and knocked it out. Just things like that. And they say those out loud instead of keeping them to themselves. And it may seem like a disturbance at the moment, but that's kind of what's going through their head. And 5 is taking over. For an example, the teacher says, "Who believes in fairies? Clap your hands." Everyone claps their hands, and then little Joey raises his hand and goes, "No, no, 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 I do not believe in fairies," and starts talking about how fairies are not real, and he kind of just takes over that conversation. A question that I have is, what are some strategies and classroom management ideas that I can implement in my own classroom to allow kids to be engaged and actively communicating during story time, but remaining focused on the read aloud instead of just focusing on their interpretation? Because those are important, but getting to the main point is also very important.